She thought she was just helping a stranger, but when she saw what he had on his finger, her world stopped. Because that ring wasn't supposed to be there, especially not with him. She thought she was just helping a stranger, but when she saw what he had on his finger, her world stopped. Because that ring wasn't supposed to be there, especially not with him. Lucia lived in a forgotten corner of the map, a town so small that not even digital maps showed it clearly. She was only 10 years old, but her eyes had already seen too much. Her mother, sick for months, spent her days lying down, coughing and sighing. Her father, the only one who supported the household, had left one morning 3 years earlier to work at a mechanic's shop 2 towns away, and never came back. No one knew what happened. No news, no letter, no call, nothing. Lucia and her mother learned to survive on whatever they could. Occasionally, some villagers gave them food. Lucia also walked the roads collecting bottles, cans, or anything she could resell. She didn't complain. She had a strange serenity only those who have lost a lot ever learn to carry. Every morning, before the sun had fully risen, Lucia would sling a torn cloth bag over her shoulder and go out into the world with the hope that maybe, just maybe, that day something different would happen. She didn't expect miracles, just something different. Something to break the cycle of silence. That morning didn't seem any different. She walked along the dusty road that circled the village, softly humming a song her mother used to hum. The sky was clear, and the warm air caressed her skin, until she saw it. In the distance, a black luxury car was stopped at the side of the road. The hood was up, and next to it, a well-dressed man was talking on the phone, gesturing in frustration. Lucia didn't know much about car brands, but she knew that kind of car didn't belong out there. She stopped to watch, not out of curiosity, but out of habit. Her instincts told her something was off in the scene. Something didn't fit. Something that, without knowing it, was about to change everything. Lucia took a deep breath and decided to approach. Not because she was nosy, but because something inside her, maybe a mix of intuition and routine, told her she should. She walked softly, her bag slung over her shoulder, and her eyes cast down, as if asking permission with her body before saying a word. The man, clearly annoyed by the lack of cell signal, didn't see her until she was only a few steps from the car. He was tall, about 40 years old, wearing a suit that clearly didn't belong in that landscape of dirt and heat. His shoes still shined despite the dust, and his gold watch looked heavy on his wrist. Lucia spoke up timidly. "Do you need help, sir?" The man turned around, surprised. It took a moment for him to process what he was seeing. A thin girl, in worn clothes, with large eyes that spoke louder than words. He let out a short, disbelieving laugh and responded with sarcasm. "You? You know about cars?" Lucia nodded without being offended. "My dad was a mechanic. He taught me some things." The man hesitated. He looked at the open engine, then up at the sky, then at nothing in particular. There were no tow trucks nearby, and he had an important meeting in less than an hour. Finally, he sighed, shrugged, and said, "Well, I don't have many options. Go ahead." Lucia set her bag down, stepped up on a stone to get a better look at the engine, and started checking. Her movements were slow but sure. She touched everything carefully, like someone who respected the machine, and the memory of the one who had taught her. In just a few minutes, she found the problem. A loose hose was overheating the engine. With her small but steady hands, she secured it and blew into a metal part that seemed clogged. Then, she gently closed the hood and said, "Try starting it." "Now," the man did. He turned the key, and to his surprise, the engine roared to life. He smiled, genuinely impressed. "It works," he exclaimed, stepping out of the car. "Wow," You really knew what you were doing." Lucia smiled faintly and wiped her hands on her pants. It was something simple. The man took out his wallet and searched for a bill, but when he offered it, she shook her head. "I didn't do it for money." The man looked at her, confused. He wasn't used to that. To people who give without expecting anything. To kindness without a price. For a second, it felt like the world stopped. And it was in that moment, when he lowered his hand with the bill, that Lucia saw something on his finger. A familiar glint. A gold ring with a blue stone that seemed to burn under the sunlight. Her smile faded. Her chest tightened. Because that ring was impossible to forget. Lucia froze. Something inside her broke, or maybe froze entirely, like a wave of ice flooding through her body. Her eyes locked on that ring, but her mind had traveled far away. To a Sunday afternoon when her father, covered in motor grease, would sit her on his lap and proudly show her that exact ring. "This ring belonged to your grandfather," he used to say. "Promise me that whenever you see it, you'll remember that I'm your father, and that I love you more than my own life." The blue stone had a tiny crack on the side. Small, almost invisible, but unmistakable. It was him, no doubt. And now, that ring was on the finger of a stranger. Wealthy, polished, and completely disconnected from her world. Lucia's heart started pounding. A knot formed in her throat. Her words wouldn't come out. It wasn't just shock. It was fear. Fear of discovering what was hidden behind what she was seeing. The man noticed something had changed. The girl's expression was no longer the same. She wasn't smiling. She didn't seem calm anymore. Her once warm eyes now trembled. He slowly lowered the hand with the ring and asked, "Is something wrong?" Lucia took a deep breath, her voice barely audible. "That ring? Where did you get it?" The man frowned, confused. He looked at his finger, then back at the girl. "This? It came with the car. It was in the glove box when I bought it a couple of years ago. I thought it was just a trinket left behind by the previous owner." "Why?" Lucia stepped back, then took another step. Her legs were shaking. Inside, she wanted to run. But more than anything, she needed answers. That ring belonged to my dad. Silence fell between them, thick and heavy. The millionaire didn't know what to say. For the first time, something inside him cracked too. He examined the ring more closely. He'd never paid attention to it. But now, after hearing her unexpected confession, he started to understand that it might not just be a forgotten ring, but a clue. "What was your father's name?" "Benjamin Salgado. He was a mechanic. He disappeared 3 years ago." The man blinked, processing the words slowly. The car he'd bought had come from an auction, salvaged from an accident, on a rural highway. He had never really looked into it. Bought it because it was a deal, with a few damages he repaired, and he never questioned the car's past. But now, he realized that this vehicle carried more than metal and oil stains. It carried a buried story. Lucia looked down. Her voice, barely a whisper, said what the man feared the most. "That car was the last one my dad ever drove." The millionaire felt a chill that had nothing to do with the breeze. He grabbed the steering wheel like he was holding on to something that never really belonged to him. Lucia's story had hit him like a silent hammer to the chest. He didn't know what to say, didn't know how to react. He could only look at the girl standing before him, with the dignity of someone who had lost much and still never asked for anything. He lowered his gaze to the ring on his finger. He'd been wearing it without thinking. Found it in the glove compartment the first day he inspected the car, and for some unknown reason, he put it on. It wasn't his style, but he'd worn it out of habit, as if something deep inside him didn't want to forget it. Now he understood why. That ring didn't belong to him. It never did. And worse, it was part of a story he had unknowingly carried in silence for 2 years. Lucia slowly walked toward the car. She looked under the hood, then inside. Something in her eyes had shifted. It wasn't anger. It was something softer. A quiet blend of recognition and grief. She crouched beside the driver's seat and peered beneath the floor mat. Her fingers brushed something metallic. She pulled it out gently. A small, rusty nut, engraved with the initials BS. Her lips quivered. "My dad signed everything he repaired," she murmured, almost in a trance. "He said a job well done should always carry your name." The man felt the air thicken. Something stirred inside him. He remembered the car had come to him through a legal sale, bought quietly. No history, no story. The report said, "Vehicle recovered from accident." But he never read the rest, never wondered what came before the deal. "Where did you buy this car?" Lucia asked, her voice low but steady. The man hesitated. "At a private auction. The dealer said the original owner died in an accident, but no family was mentioned, no name. It was all very cold." Lucia didn't cry, but something in her eyes broke completely. She didn't need more proof. This was the car, the last place her father had been alive. She could feel it, not with logic, but with the soul. Like the very air inside it still carried his voice. The man swallowed hard. Something inside him had awakened, a need to make things right. He looked at Lucia and, in the most human voice he had ever used, said, "We'll find out the whole truth together." And for the first time in years, Lucia felt seen, not as a poor girl, but as someone who deserved answers. That same afternoon, the millionaire and Lucia got into the car and drove to the nearest city. He canceled all his meetings, turned off his phone, and for the first time in years, felt like he was doing something that truly mattered. During the trip, Lucia sat silently, hugging her bag as if it held the shattered pieces of her world. Her eyes didn't cry, but they were full of memory. Esteban, behind the wheel, saw the road differently now. It was no longer just asphalt. It was the stage of a story long buried beneath paperwork, neglect, and silence. They went straight to the traffic department. The millionaire, whose name was Esteban Rivas, used his influence to access the car's historical records. The official, hesitant at first, allowed them to see the original report after a signature and special request. What they found was no coincidence. The document listed the original owner as Benjamin Salgado, who had died in a car accident on a rural highway 3 years ago. The date matched. So did the location. The report said the body was found burned in the vehicle but couldn't be identified, as there were no family contacts or proper documentation. He was listed as NN, no name. Lucia felt like she'd been hit in the chest. It was as if all the fragments that had floated in her mind finally snapped into place. Her father hadn't abandoned them. He hadn't forgotten them. He died trying to return home. But no one knew. No one searched properly. Her mother didn't have the means or strength. All that remained was silence. Until now. Esteban was torn between guilt and determination. He had been driving a car that carried the weight of an untold story. So he pushed further. He requested the judicial auction records and tracked down the storage lot where the car had been kept. There, an old employee vaguely recalled the unclaimed vehicle. But what shook them most was what they found inside a forgotten box, mixed with papers and broken parts. A burned wallet with a half-visible photo of a man smiling with a little girl, Lucia. It was her father. The ring, the engraved nut, and now the photo. There was no doubt. Lucia held the wallet with trembling fingers. She didn't cry, didn't shout. She just closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and whispered, "Thank you, Dad." And at that moment, Esteban knew nothing would ever be the same again. He couldn't just walk away. A silent debt had surfaced, and he would repay it with his soul. After leaving the courthouse with the burned wallet in her hands and her father's identity confirmed, Lucia sat silently on a bench in the Central Park. Esteban sat beside her, without speaking, not wanting to interrupt that sacred moment between a daughter and the memory of her father. Lucia slowly ran her fingers over the scorched photo as if touching it might restore a piece of time. She didn't cry or scream, but her chest rose and fell with the weight of a storm held tightly inside. Esteban watched her from the corner of his eye. In all his years in business, he had met many people, heard many stories, but never one like this. Something inside him had shifted. That car, once just a luxury item, had become a moving altar to an untold story, and he, unknowingly, had been its keeper. Lucia finally spoke, her voice quiet. "My mom was never the same after he left. She waited every day at the window until she got sick. She thought he left us, that he didn't love us anymore, and I doubted it too." Esteban felt a lump in his throat. He wanted to say something, anything, but nothing seemed enough. He gently placed his hand on her shoulder. "Your father didn't leave you. The world just left him behind." Lucia closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she understood that it wasn't abandonment. It was tragedy. It was the system's neglect. It was poverty. It was the silence that falls on those who don't have a voice. That truth didn't bring her father back, but it brought her something she had lost: peace. That night, Esteban drove her home. They passed the worn wooden house barely standing. Her mother greeted them with a weak voice, confused by the presence of a well-dressed man and her daughter's strange new calm. Lucia knelt beside her, took her hand, and whispered, "It's true, Mama. Dad never left us. He just couldn't come back." The woman let out a sigh. She didn't say much. Just one tear rolled down her cheek, as if 3 years of weight quietly dissolved. Esteban stood watching. Something in him broke completely. He thought about all he had: money, houses, cars, and all he had been missing: purpose. That night, alone in his hotel, he couldn't sleep. He took the ring off his finger and placed it on the table beside his watch, and he realized some things aren't meant to be kept. They're meant to be returned. The next morning, Esteban returned to Lucia's home. This time, he wore no suit, no expensive watch, no bodyguards, just a folder in hand and a look of quiet resolve. He knocked gently. Lucia answered the door. Her hair was tied back with an old ribbon, her clothes still the same as yesterday, but something in her eyes had changed. Brighter, stronger. He greeted her mother politely and sat at the creaky wooden table. He placed the folder in front of them. Inside were documents, school forms, medical authorizations, and a handwritten letter. "I can't change what happened," he said with a steady, gentle voice, "but I can make sure what comes next is different." Lucia raised an eyebrow, cautiously opening the papers. Esteban had secured a full scholarship for her at a private school in the city, transportation and materials included. He had also arranged for her mother to receive specialized medical care at no cost. But that wasn't all. He had purchased, in the name of the Salgado family, a small piece of land near the town, with a modest but well-built house. Not luxurious, just humane. "This house isn't charity," Esteban added. "It's a way to return what life took from you. Through neglect, through silence, and yes, through my own indifference." Lucia didn't know what to say. Her hands trembled as she held the papers. Her mother stayed quiet, her eyes full of disbelief. They had learned to receive, out of necessity, often with shame. But this was different. This was restoration. "Why would you do all this?" her mother asked softly. Esteban looked down, thought for a moment, then replied, "Because sometimes we spend our lives collecting, until we realize we have nothing that truly matters. And then, life, God, or fate places someone like Lucia in your path, and you understand. You still have time to change." That afternoon, Esteban didn't return to the office. He canceled an international trip and spent the day helping them pack what little they had. They laughed for the first time in years, shared bread and coffee, told stories. And when the sun dipped behind the hills, Lucia stepped outside, looked up at the sky, and whispered, "Dad, we're okay now. You can rest." And for the first time, she said it without pain. Months passed. The wind no longer carried dust alone. It carried laughter. Lucia, in her clean uniform and backpack full of books, walked through the gates of her new school each morning. She had notebooks with her name, pencils and colors she'd never dreamed of, and above all, a place where no one called her the poor girl. She was seen as brilliant, creative, full of ideas and dreams. Her mother, stronger now, had started a small garden behind their new house, made possible by the medical care she now received. Flowers bloomed as if they knew that soil had been nourished by hope. Esteban had changed too. He withdrew from several of his business partnerships, places where he gave money, but not heart. He sold the car, the same one that had carried Lucia back to her past. He donated to a local museum with a plaque that read, "Inside this car traveled a story that deserved to be told." Every week, without fail, he returned to visit Lucia, and he always came on foot. He said some roads should be walked slowly, so the soul doesn't get left behind. Lucia always greeted him with hibiscus tea and a notebook full of stories. She had begun to write, tales of magical girls and quiet heroes, often featuring a brave little girl. Esteban read them aloud like a ritual. Sometimes they cried. Sometimes they laughed so hard her mother had to remind them it was dinner time. The silence in that yard had been replaced by life. One afternoon, Lucia asked him, "Do you think all this happened by chance?" Esteban smiled softly. "I think destiny shouts, but most people don't listen. You did." And he was right. Lucia, with her big heart and dusty hands, had done what most adults never dare. Change the direction of a story with a simple act. Helping, asking, daring to see what others ignored. And that courage, selfless and quiet, sparked a chain of change that touched more lives than she'd ever know. The town changed too. Inspired by her story, neighbors began helping more, seeing one another again, remembering that big acts often live inside small gestures. The story of Lucia and her father made it to the local radio, then a magazine. But Lucia didn't care about fame. The only thing she held close was the ring, now hanging from a chain around her neck. She touched it whenever she felt scared, not as a symbol of loss, but of inheritance. Not of wealth, but of love, craft, and dignity. Her father was gone, yes, but she brought him back with a single glance, and just as a ring had turned an entire story full circle, so had Lucia, with courage, with truth, and with heart.